Before we start the time lapse, let's start with a little backstory. Let me set the scene for you. The year is 2021, and lumber prices have increased by over 400%. Back in 2017, when we were designing the house, we planned to build the entrance structure out of wood. Once the effects of 2020 came around, the cost of everything went sky high, and we had to come up with some creative solutions to stretch our budget for the house considering the circumstances. To put it into perspective, the cost of one 2x6x10 in 2019 was about $3.70, and when we were getting quotes for the entrance structure, it was about $21.50. That's a huge jump. Not only that, but the price of plywood, siding, and materials in general tripled. Gas prices went up, which meant delivery prices also went up, and so many items and products were out of stock for weeks or months. All of these issues made us seriously reconsider a few aspects of our house. After a few weeks of researching and going down so many rabbit holes, we found our new plan. We decided to use the leftover panels from the cutouts of the containers and go to the overstocked steel yard to find used materials to build the structure. We have plenty of panels, so this wasn't an issue. And we had one lucky trip to the overstock yard where we bought not only the structure for the roof, but we also bought the rest of the steel needed for the entrance structure. In this time lapse, we will show you how we developed this part of our house into this. So with that being said, let the build begin. As I mentioned before, we picked up almost all the steel for the structure at the overstock steel yard, which meant the first step was refurbishing and rust removal. So fun. We used our wet sandblaster for this step, which is an excellent way to refurbish deeply rusted steel. A lot of people ask us why we use the wet sandblaster instead of a dry sandblaster or rust converter. The wet sandblaster is great because we can reach a constant 4,000 psi with our pressure washer, and our air compressor only goes up to about 145 psi. Also, the amount of time we wait for the air compressor to fill back up really adds up at the end of the day. Therefore, the wet sandblaster is much faster and much stronger than what our air compressor is capable of. I am looking into a gas-powered air compressor for the future, so we'll see how that evolves with time. Now for the rust converter. Usually when we use the wet sandblaster, it's because the rust is deeply pitted and flaky, like ultra rust. And from our experience, the rust converter does not work on this level of rust. After we were finished refurbishing all the steel, it looked like this. And we were ready to paint everything. When the steel was dry, we used the excavator to move the steel to the second level of the house. Once we got the steel up there, it was time to start welding them to the I-beams above the ICF wall. The steel tubing will make up the vertical support of the entrance structure of our container house, and we have some unique plans on how we are going to get the next round of tubing and I-beams up to the third level, so stay tuned for that. after the first few tubes were installed, it was time to rinse and repeat for the rest of the steel tubing. And that's how you do it. The last tube was a little bit challenging to reach, so we had to do a little teamwork action with the extension ladder to get it done. Don't worry, I got over my fear of heights after we built the second level of our house. Still a little scary though.
I don't know who will install this window, but that will be a pain in the ass.
A little bit of foreshadowing there, but I digress. Okay, now that we have the vertical tubing all set up, it's time to work on the horizontal bracing in between the tubes. For this, we are using leftover C-channels from our reinforcements and a few other pieces from the overstock yard. First step was to cut all the pieces to size, and after that we welded them in between the steel tubing. This setup will also play a part in how we're going to do the flooring of this structure. These horizontal pieces help to reinforce the vertical tubing and also give us space to install what will eventually go between each of the vertical steel tubing. If you guys are interested in any of the full-length videos from this time lapse, I added them to a playlist which is linked in the description. Progress. Okay, quick break to show you how amazing the view is from the house. Look at that. And right back to it. Okay, so this area is going to be for the stairwell that goes into the garage. We continued to use our overstock C-channels for the frame and welded them to the I-beams and the entrance structure. If you've been following us for a while, you know one of our mottos is grind, weld, paint, repeat. And this day was definitely a grind, weld, paint, repeat kind of day. So the challenging part about this structure is that this wall is not parallel with the rest of the house. So it's sort of set at an angle, which means we have a lot of angles to figure out, and it complicates a lot of aspects of the build. I remember being in school and learning geometry and thinking, when am I ever going to use this? And well, surprise, that time has come. Anyways, after we painted the stairwell frame, we moved on to building what will eventually be the terrace to one of the bedrooms of our house. Spoiler alert! This frame we are building is also part of the floating slab / pan floor we will pour for the entire entrance structure. Pretty epic. A few more steps until we get to that point, but stay tuned, okay? Since the terrace will be exposed to the exterior, we used the flat bar to create a slope on the balcony for drainage. The flat bar is also what we will use as the reference for screeding the concrete. Just wait and see. But first, a word from today's sponsor. Did you know every time you fill up gas or get some food, you could earn cash? Let me introduce you to the Upside app. With the free Upside app, you could earn cash back on daily essentials like gas, groceries, and dining. With over 100,000 retailers on the app, it's easy to find offers near you. And yes, it's real cash back. No confusing rewards points or credits. Just actual cash you can transfer straight to your bank account. The Upside app is especially great for us because our ambulance camper has a 50-gallon tank. When we're ready to fill up the tank, we check the Upside app to see where we can earn the most cash back. This is a great way to earn cash back on things you're already purchasing in your everyday life. Frequent Upside users earn an average of $300 per month. To find out how much you can earn, click the link in the description to download the Upside app, or scan this QR code. And don't forget to use our promo code to get an extra 25 cents cash back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Download the Upside app and give it a try and see how much you can earn. Special thank you to Upside for sponsoring this video. Now, let's get back to it. The time has come to set up the floating slab, pan deck, concrete pan floor, however you want to call it. I'm going to call it a pan floor because it's easy. Okay, so basically, we are going to be using a bunch of our overstock corrugated panels from the cutouts of our shipping containers as the horizontal support for this concrete pan deck floor slab system. So right now, what I'm doing is plasma cutting the panels so they fit in between each I-beam above the garage. You'll see what I mean in a minute. This is the general idea. And after we make sure they fit properly, we will weld them to the I-beams and to each other. I was actually shocked at the strength of these panels. They didn't flex at all when we stood on them, even when we were more than a few people standing on them. Like when we filmed the ad for Bose. Remember that? Good times. I'm really happy we went this route with building the entrance structure because it allowed us to reuse a ton of our overstock building materials, and we saved a lot of money by doing that. We did the exact same setup for the bedroom terrace. After the panels were welded in, I welded a bunch of anchor bolts to anchor down the concrete slab. The next issue we faced is filling up all the gaps where the I-beams are and also in between the corrugated panels. In the end, we decided to use concrete to fill these gaps because it was the cheapest and strongest way to seal the gaps. This actually ended up working really well and was pretty easy to do. This was the end result, and while it's not the most pretty, it's exactly what we needed. Now that the floor is sealed, it's time to set up the rebar cage for the pan floor. I used the plasma cutter to cut all the rebar to size, which took some time because we had a lot of rebar to cut. Once the rebar was cut, we laid concrete dobies on the pan floor and then started creating the rebar grid. With everything sealed and the rebar grid set up, we are ready to pour some concrete. So exciting, but also stressful. Since we are up on the second level of the house, we had the concrete pumped up to the second level and steadily worked our way from one side to the other. Large concrete projects are always really stressful because there's only a certain amount of time before the concrete starts to do its thing. So there's only one chance to get it right, and time is of the essence. We're lucky it's pretty humid and cool where we live, so that slows the chemical reaction a little bit, but it's still really stressful. Last part, here we go. At the end of the day, the pan floor came out amazing, and I'm super proud of what we created. There were some really tricky parts to that part of the entrance structure, but just wait until you see what we do next.
Freeze! Stop! Plasma time!
Okay, things are going to get a little crazy from this point because now we have to cut and place these huge I-beams on top of the steel tubing we installed. This beam wasn't too heavy, but it was really awkward to place, so it made it really challenging to get it up there. Eventually we got it up there and I welded it to the steel tubing and anchored it to the house. The second beam proved to be much more challenging to place, and we made several attempts until we gave up for the night. The next day, we welded a few pieces of steel to the container to hang the chain hoist from, and used the chain hoist to lift the beam into place. Finally, we got it up there and welded it in, but the struggle isn't over yet, and the hardest part is next. The plan is to lift the beam on top of these I-beams, then connect it to the winch and the chain hoist, then lift it into place. For reference, the beam weighs about 700 pounds. Man, my heart was racing while we were lifting this beam. It was so scary. Sometimes on the ranch, we have to do dangerous things carefully, and this is definitely one of those times. I can't even begin to tell you how happy I was when we finally got this beam in place. It was pretty stressful and scary, and I'm really glad everything went well. Attempt number 1. Now it's time to build Sketchy Scaffold Gen 1. We're using the excavator and the winch to get one of the excess steel tubes for the roof up on top of the yellow beams.
First try, success.
The sketchy scaffold will take on many forms throughout this build, so wait and see how it evolves with time. For now, we are using it to install the vertical steel tubing on top of the yellow I-beams. First, we had to cut each steel tube to size. We used the winch to bring each one up onto the third level of the house, which is where we'll be working on them. Once we got the first one up there, we welded it to the entrance structure. Then we went back and repeated all the same steps for the rest of the steel tubing. Since we need to access several areas on the exterior of the entrance structure, we had to rent a lift. This was our first time ever using a lift, so that was a fun and interesting experience. So basically, we are installing each steel tube exactly above where they are installed on the second level. The lift was really a game changer for this step and made it pretty easy to access where we needed to work. We welded the steel tubing to the entrance structure and also anchored them to the house. Next up, we are working on the horizontal bracing for the two smaller sides of the entrance structure. We used our leftover C-channels and welded them in between the steel tubing. Once we were done with one side, we did the same thing on the opposite side. We have something really big coming for the longest side of the entrance structure, so wait and see what we do with that.
Here we go.
So this I-beam is about 50 feet long and very, very heavy. So the first challenge was to get it off of the delivery truck so we can work on it. Okay, everybody, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This was probably the scariest moment for me operating the excavator. I was so nervous. But sometimes you have to rise to the challenge. And I did. This I-beam is going to go on top of the steel tubing on the long side of the entrance structure, and it's going to cantilever out above the terrace. But before we can put it up there, we need to get a solid layer of paint on it to protect it against corrosion, which is the greatest enemy when living near the ocean. Also, we ran out of wire wheels, so we had to work with what we had to remove the rust, which was the crimped wire brushes. Not the greatest for this application, but sometimes we have to make do with what we have. We only make supply runs about once every 2 to 3 weeks because it takes the entire day and we don't want to waste too many days getting supplies. Once the beam was dry, we had to crane it up on top of the steel tubing and weld it in, which was also pretty terrifying. I guess we're out here conquering all of our fears on Pacific Pines Ranch. In the end, everything went well and we got it welded in and level.
Time to party, everybody, so let's go.
Alrighty, so let me explain what's going on here. So this is our entrance structure. The entrance of the house is here, and the entire structure will house the entrance and the stairs to the 3rd level. So it will have 20-foot ceilings and be completely open to the interior of the house. So the plan is to use the leftover container panels and weld them into each opening. This side of the entrance structure will be mostly windows, but all of this will be closed up with the container panels. The plan is to fill in these openings with the panels and then move on to the next step. So, let's get to it! As you all probably already know, we saved all of the cutouts from our shipping containers and we have been using them a lot. So like I said before, we will be using them to fill in the openings in between the steel tubing. We purposely built the entrance structure so the panels would fit inside, and now we are working on fitting them and welding them all together. We used a small piece of wood and clamped it on the back side to place the panels, and then added them one by one to the opening. With one opening all closed up, it's time to move on to the next opening. This opening will have a window at the far end, so it will be a little bit different, but generally it's the same setup. Of course, it started raining in the middle of us installing panels, so that totally sucked. But we used one of our plastic tarps and made a little cover to get the job done. And this is when we create Sketchy Scaffold Gen 2. So now that the second level is pretty much enclosed, we are heading up to the third level to weld in the panels. To rent the lift is really expensive, so we decided to build a scaffold so we can take our time with this step. As the build has progressed, I've found that our excavator's second purpose is for moving huge pieces of steel. We used our extra steel tubing from the roof for part of the scaffold, which worked really great. After the scaffold was set up, I did a little victory dance and we were ready to install the second wave of panels. At this point, we had a good rhythm down, so we were making good progress. But I made a pretty major mistake on one of the panels. Don't worry, it was rectified, but if you want to know the full story, check out the full-length video. We continued with the process, cut, place, weld, repeat, and worked our way across each opening. These panels are also going to double as our exterior siding, which is why we are taking such care to place them and continuously weld them together. We are basically creating a version of a shipping container for the entire entrance structure. But at least that way the house will look cohesive. At one point, I thought it would be amazing to install glass panels instead of the corrugated panels. But after we received the quote for the tiny glass panels on the end of the entrance structure, you'll understand why we didn't go that route. A girl can dream though. This is where our entrance door is going to be, and we have something absolutely epic planned for the entrance door, so be sure to subscribe to see how that turns out. And voila, we are making some progress. Now we are working on the frames for the small glass panels we're going to install later. So we got the first part of the frame welded in and then went back and painted everything. So this is the last of the corrugated panels we'll be installing for the 3rd level. Pretty exciting. And now that majority of the panels are installed, it's time for something new. Sort of. We are heading back where we started with the wet sandblaster. So we are going to be using the wet sandblaster to refurbish a few of the panels and clean up the corrosion that's accumulated since we started. Once we finished sandblasting, we smoothed everything out with the orbital sander and prepared everything to be painted. The paint we use is a 2-part marine grade paint, so we finished painting the epoxy primer and now we're going to paint the acrylic top coat, which is the black paint. Remember when I was telling you about the quote for the glass panels? Well, due to inflation, we received a quote for around $6,000 to fill the 4 openings at the end of the entrance structure with glass. The 2 skinny, small openings and the 2 large openings. We definitely did not want to spend that much on glass, and that shattered my dreams of having the entire entrance structure filled with glass. But alas, life must go on. So we channeled our inner ingenuity and went to the overstock window store and ended up finding all the glass we needed for $300. Pretty epic. Go over and watch the full-length video if you want to see the full story on that. So right now we are working on creating a frame for each opening so we can install the window and the glass panel. After we installed and painted the frames, we used the handy chain hoist yet again to lift the window up to the 3rd level. The fact that we ended up finding 2 matching picture windows that were basically almost the exact size we needed was shocking. We did end up having to trim a little bit off the flange of this window to make it fit. Of course, the day we tried to install the window, it was super windy, which made it a little more challenging than usual. But we got it in there, and that meant I had to complete a victory dance to celebrate our progress. After the picture window was in, we installed the glass panel into the narrow opening. Now that the 3rd level is all situated, we are going to do the exact same thing, but on the 2nd level. Except this picture window is quite a bit larger than the one on the 3rd level. We were able to use almost all leftover materials for both the 2nd and 3rd level window frames, which was great because we saved even more money by doing that. I welded these little anchor tabs onto the frame, and this is what we used to screw the window in place. Now that the picture window frame is all set up, we are going to work on the frame for the glass panel. By now, you guys probably know the drill. Frames are all set, so it's time to paint and then install everything. I don't know if it translates well on screen, but this window is gigantic. It's definitely the largest piece of glass we have in the house. So I didn't get to do the entrance structure in all glass, but this entire side of our house is almost all glass, so I guess that's a good compromise. After the picture window was installed, Viant applied some sealant to protect against the weather, and afterwards we moved on to installing the glass panel. Viant installed double-sided tape all around the frame and then pressed the glass panel into the frame. After it was set, he used a sealant adhesive to secure the glass panel in place. This part of the entrance structure turned out absolutely amazing, and I'm so proud of what we were able to create. Okay, now for the very last part of the entrance structure. We will be installing the last round of corrugated panels into the last opening. We got quite a bit of concrete on this area when we poured the pan floor, so first we had to remove the concrete so we could prep the area. So we cleaned the steel where the panels will be welded in, and then we got to work on prepping the corrugated panels. So we are doing the same process as we did for all the other corrugated panels, except this time we have a few tools that made the job way easier, like this self-leveling laser level. Game changer. At this point, I feel like Viant and I have really found our flow, and we are able to complete tasks faster and more efficiently. Being able to work together as a team has really fortified our relationship and made us way better at problem solving together. Once the panels were ready, we welded them into the opening one by one and worked our way across the opening. So this will be the very last panel for the entrance structure. Wow, what a moment. And just like that, the last panel is in place. Special thank you to those of you who made it all the way to the end of this video. I sincerely appreciate all of you who watch, comment, and like our videos. We've come a long way since the beginning of our build, and we've encountered many challenges that we've had to overcome, and it's not over yet. The entrance structure was really tricky to build, but in the end, everything turned out amazing. I'm really glad we designed and built everything the way we did, and things are really starting to come together. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see how the house turns out. We'll be starting the interiors pretty soon, so things are about to get really exciting. We've been working on a lot of projects recently, and I'm really looking forward to sharing them with you all. So until then, we'll see you in the next video. Help support our channel by leaving a comment, liking, and sharing this video. As always, you guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to keep up with our projects and adventures on Pacific Pines Ranch. We put out new videos every Saturday, and sometimes even during the week, so be sure to subscribe and hit the notification button so you don't miss any. Okay, bye.